Two guys live 2 blocks apart. They are roughly the same age, earn about the same paycheck, and have a similar balance in the bank at 28. Both of them spend exactly $800 a month, every month, for the next 25 years. The first guy spends his on car payments. New truck every 6 years, financed at the going rate, traded in at the end, replaced with another one. By the time he's 53, he's poured $240,000 into a string of trucks, and he's currently sitting in another one that'll be worth about a third of what he paid for it in 5 years. The second guy sends that same $800 into a basic S&P 500 index fund and never touches the account. By the time he's 53, his account is worth approximately $1,061,000. Two guys, identical paychecks, both moving $800 a month for 25 straight years. The first ends up with a depreciating asset and not much else to show for it. The second ends with $1,060,000 and a portfolio that prints another $42,000 a year by itself. I want to spend this video walking through that second path, year by year, because the year by year version is the part of compounding that nobody actually shows you. Most personal finance videos give you the ending number, slap a chart on screen, and call it a day. The ending number is the easy part. The hard part is what happens in years 3, 8, 14, 20, the years when it looks like nothing is happening, even though the most important thing in your financial life is quietly working in the background. I'm Tom. I hit financial independence in my 40s on a regular salary without a startup exit or an inheritance or some trading miracle that bailed me out. I'm the second guy in that story, more or less. I've already made a video on this channel about how those car payments quietly steal your retirement. This one is the other half of the math, the version where I walk you through, year by year, what the path actually looks like when you point the 800 at the index fund instead. Subscribe if this is the kind of breakdown your school never bothered to do. Let's start with where the $800 number even comes from, because that trips people up immediately. When I say $800 a month, most people hear, I don't have $800 a month. That's almost always wrong. The average new car loan payment in the United States right now is $767 a month, according to Experian's most recent State of the Automotive Finance report. Roughly 1 in 5 new car buyers is paying more than $1,000. The average American household, in other words, is already spending close to $800 a month on a depreciating asset that loses roughly 10% of its value the day it leaves the dealership lot, and about 20% by the end of its first year. So the $800 question isn't really about finding new money. It's about redirecting money you might already have committed somewhere else. Maybe it's a car payment. Maybe it's a slightly bigger house than you needed. Maybe it's eating out 4 times a week, or the subscriptions that quietly auto-renew, or the gear you keep upgrading for hobbies you haven't done since 2022. The 800 is somewhere in your budget. You just haven't aimed it yet. Now the headline math, then we zoom in. $800 a month invested in a broad stock index fund, compounded monthly, at the S&P 500's long-term historical return of roughly 10% over 25 years comes out to about $1,061,000. Of that, $240,000 is money you actually contributed. $821,000 is compound growth. You put in roughly 23% of the final number. The market did the other 77% of the work. One honest caveat before we go year by year, because pretending this away would be irresponsible. $1,060,000 in 2051 dollars is not the same as $1,060,000 today. At a 3% inflation rate, the purchasing power of that ending number in today's money is closer to $507,000. Still life-changing, still the equivalent of a 5-year retirement, a paid-off house, or a real cushion for the rest of your life. But it is not the same as waking up tomorrow with $1 million in current buying power. The market's job is to keep you ahead of inflation, not to be inflation-proof. With that on the table, here's what the year by year actually looks like. Year 1. You've put in $9,600 of your own money. Your account is worth about $10,052. Total growth, $450. The market gave you the value of a nice dinner. Year 2. Contributions total $19,200. Account value, $21,158. Growth, just under $2,000. You've worked 2 years for what looks like a rounding error. Year 3. 28,800 in, 33,400 out. Growth of 4,600. Still less than 5% of what you put in. These first 3 years are the discouragement zone, and they are by far the most dangerous part of the 25-year plan. Not because the math is failing. The math is working exactly as it should. The dangerous part is psychological. You're watching 3 years of your own paycheck go into an account, and the market is barely visible. Most people who quit here. Every dollar in the account is essentially still yours. There's no magic happening yet because compounding requires a balance to compound on, and you don't really have a balance yet. You have a stack of your own dollars sitting in a brokerage account, growing slowly. The discipline matters more than the math at this stage. If you stay here, you collect everything that comes after. Year 5. Your account is at $62,000. 48 of it is yours, 14 is the market. The market is finally visible, working as a junior partner. Year 7 is where the first real signal shows up. The account hits $97,000. $67,000 of that is your contribution. But the growth in that single year, what the market added in year 7 alone, was about $8,700, approaching your annual contribution of $9,600. Almost nobody talks about year 7. But year 7 is where the conversation starts to change. For the first 7 years, you were the engine. By the end of year 7, the engine is almost matching what you put in. Year 8 is the first invisible crossover, and I think it's the most important hidden milestone in the entire plan. Your contribution in year 8 is $9,600. The market's contribution that same year is about $10,585. For the first time, the market is doing more work in a single year than you are. Most people who hit year 8 never notice this happened. There's no label on the brokerage statement that says, "Congratulations, you're now a passenger in your own retirement account." The balance crosses $117,000 and you go back to whatever you were doing on a Tuesday. But this is the year your role changed. From this point forward, you are no longer the primary engine. The engine is the engine. Every year after this, the market's contribution beats yours, and beats yours by larger margins. This is also why most personal finance content overcomplicates the entire game. They sell you stock picking systems, option strategies, tax optimization courses, for what should be a 30-minute decision in your 20s, and then 25 years of doing nothing. The strategy works precisely because the year 8 crossover happens whether you're paying attention or not. Years 9 through 13 are the middle stretch. The account goes from $139,000 at the end of year 9 to $254,000 by the end of year 13. You roughly doubled your account in 5 years. But you also contributed $48,000 of your own money during that time, so it's hard to feel the doubling. The growth is happening at a scale where you can still kind of imagine it being your own savings. This is where the second wave of dropouts happens. Most people who survive the year 3 discouragement zone get knocked out somewhere in this middle stretch. The pattern goes like this. Life happens. Kitchen needs to be redone, or the car needs replacing, or there's a wedding, or the kid needs braces. Something legitimate. And there's this brokerage account sitting at over $200,000 with a nice round number on it. And pulling out $25,000 for the kitchen seems totally reasonable because it's only 12% of the account. The math says you'll make it back. You won't make it back. The $25,000 you pull out in year 12 would have been worth approximately $86,000 by year 25 if you'd left it alone. The withdrawal isn't really $25,000. It's $86,000 of future use money. Every dollar you pull out during these middle years has 13 years of compounding still ahead of it, which means each of those dollars is going to more than triple between now and the end of the plan. The statement just shows the $25,000. The real cost is invisible until it's too late to recover. Year 14 is the first, wait, what? Moment. And I think it's the most underrated milestone of the entire plan. By the end of year 14, the account is at $291,000. The growth in that single year, what the market did for you in year 14 alone, was approximately $27,000. Read that twice. The market added $27,000 to your account in a single year, which is almost 3 times what you contributed that year, and almost 3 times the entire balance of the account at the end of year 1. This is the year you start to understand what compounding actually is. Not the textbook definition, the lived experience of it. Your account is growing by more than you can put in, and the gap is widening every year. The market is doing about 60% of the annual work. You could, hypothetically, slow down on contributions, and the balance would still climb every year on the strength of growth alone. Most people who reach year 14 never quit again. Year 14 is the lock-in. Years 15 through 17 are the momentum stretch. The account grows from $331,000 at year 15 to $425,000 at year 17. Annual growth crosses $30,000 at year 15 and $40,000 at year 17. You're putting in $9,600 a year, and the market is adding 3 to 4 times that. The ratio is now tilted aggressively in your favor. Year 18, the account crosses $480,000. Year 20, $607,000. $500,000 in retirement money, built on what some random 28-year-old couldn't believe he'd ever be able to do. And that random 28-year-old is you, except now you're 48. Here's the wild thing about year 20. If you stopped contributing entirely at this point, if the $800 a month just stopped going in, and you let the account ride for the remaining 5 years at 10%, you'd end at approximately $978,000 by year 25. Nearly the full million, with 5 fewer years of contributions. The reason is that the money you would have put in during years 21 through 25, another $48,000, only gets a handful of years to compound. The growth in the last 5 years is mostly the existing $600,000 growing on itself, not new contributions doing anything special. The contributions matter most at the front of the plan. The compounding does most of the work at the back. Years 21 through 25 are the takeoff. The account goes from $607,000 at the end of year 20 to $1,061,000 at the end of year 25. That's roughly $406,000 of growth in the last 5 years alone, which is nearly 70% more than your total contributions of $240,000 across the entire 25 years. The shape of the curve at the end is the most extreme part of the compounding, which is why people who pull money out at year 5 or year 10, when the curve still looks linear, are sacrificing the part of the curve that does the most work. They quit before the math gets interesting. Now I want to talk about why most people don't actually finish the 25 years, because the math is the easy part. The behavior is not. There are 3 quiet enemies that take down most people who start this plan. Enemy 1 is the pause. Somewhere around year 3 or year 4, life will give you a reason to just pause the contributions for a few months. A car repair, a medical bill, a legitimate, unavoidable expense. The problem is, the pause becomes permanent for roughly 2/3 of the people who do it. Because once the automatic transfer stops, restarting it requires a deliberate decision. And deliberate decisions about boring monthly transfers tend to lose to whatever feels urgent that month. The fix is to never pause. Reduce the amount if you have to. $300 a month is better than zero. Zero means you've broken the system, and a broken system takes more energy to repair than a slower system takes to keep running. Enemy 2 is what I call raise absorption. You start at 28, putting in $800 a month. By age 35, you've gotten 3 raises, and you're earning maybe 50% more than you started. The natural thing for the contribution to do over those years is climb with your income. The natural thing for most people's contributions to do, instead, is stay at $800 forever, while their spending climbs to swallow the entire raise. The result is your contribution holds steady in nominal dollars, but shrinks every year as a percentage of your income. The fix is to bump the automatic transfer by $25 or $50 every time you get a raise, before you ever see that raise hit your checking account. Future you doesn't get to compete with present you on the same field. Enemy 3 is the urge to do something interesting with the money once the balance gets big enough to feel real. Around year 12 or 15, your account will cross 200,000 and you'll start getting pitches. A friend will mention an investment opportunity, a YouTube ad will sell you an option strategy, someone at a barbecue will start talking about real estate syndications. The pitch underneath all of it is the same. Now that you have real money, you should be doing real investing. That sentence is one of the most expensive sentences in personal finance. The strategy that got you to 200,000 is the same strategy that gets you to $1 million. Tinkering with it doesn't speed it up. It almost always slows it down or breaks it. My retired neighbor Paul put this to me once over a beer in the backyard. He said the smartest financial move he ever made was learning to do absolutely nothing on red market days. He had a coworker who'd been 20 years into the same boring index plan and pulled half of it out in early 2020 because cable news was screaming. Paul didn't touch his. The coworker never recovered the gap. The other thing I want to put in front of you before we get to what this actually buys you is the cost of waiting. Because the year-by-year version of this video is meaningless if you don't actually start. Wait 1 year before starting, and the same plan ends at $952,000 instead of $1,061,000. That single year cost you about $110,000. Wait 3 years, the plan ends at $763,000, almost $300,000 less. Wait 5 years, the plan ends at $607,000, $454,000 less, which happens to be almost twice everything you contributed across the full 25 years. Every year you wait at the front gets stripped from the back. The years closest to the finish line do the most work, so the years you skip at the start are stealing from the years you'd most want to keep. That's the part nobody emphasizes enough. The cost of waiting isn't the contributions you missed. It's what those contributions would have become at the end, where the curve was steepest. So what does $1 million actually buy you in the real-world version of this story? Using the standard 4% withdrawal rule, $1 million supports about $42,000 a year of withdrawals in retirement without depleting the principal. That's an income equal to roughly the US median individual wage, generated entirely by the account, with you contributing 0 hours of labor. In today's purchasing power, after the 25 years of inflation we already talked about, that $42,000 feels more like $20,000 of 2026 money, which is real income, but more, honestly, a meaningful supplement to Social Security, rather than a full replacement. The more useful way to think about what the million buys you is optionality. It's the ability to absorb a layoff in your early 50s without panic, switch to a lower paying job you actually like, drop to part-time when your knees finally tell you to, retire 5 to 10 years earlier than the average American, or survive a medical event that would otherwise wipe out a family with no cushion. The million is less about a specific retirement number and more about the breathing room it gives you in the last 2 or 3 decades of your life. That's what $800 a month for 25 years actually buys you. Optionality, not luxury. Let me get specific about the mechanics, because vague advice is useless. Open an account at one of the big 3 low-cost brokerages, which are Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab. All 3 are free. None of them charges anything to hold the account. Inside the account, buy a broad market index fund. The simplest choices are VTSAX or VTI at Vanguard, FZROX or FSKAX at Fidelity, SWTSX at Schwab. The expense ratios are between 0 and 0.04%, which is basically nothing. If your employer offers a 401k with a match, run the 401k first and contribute at least enough to capture the full match, because that's free money. After the match is captured, the rest of the $800 goes into either an IRA, where the 2026 contribution limit is $7,500 a year, or about $625 a month, or it goes into the 401k itself, or into a regular taxable brokerage account once you've maxed the tax-advantaged accounts. Set the contribution to come out the day after payday, not the end of the month, the same week the paycheck arrives, because money that sits in checking for 2 weeks has 2 weeks of opportunity to get spent on something that isn't this. Then put a recurring 6-month calendar reminder that says exactly one thing: raise the contribution by $25. That's the entire system. Don't look at the balance more than once a year. Pick your birthday or some other easy date and stay off the app the rest of the year, especially on red market days. Skip the financial news section unless you genuinely enjoy it for its own sake. The strategy depends on the years of doing nothing far more than on the day you got set up. When I started doing this in my 20s on a smaller paycheck, I couldn't put in $800. I started at closer to $400 and bumped it up as raises came in. By my mid-30s, the running number was $800, and I never reduced it. I've looked at the year-by-year version of my own account so many times that the shape of the curve is more familiar to me than my own driveway. The number at the end was bigger than I expected on paper, and smaller in real purchasing power than the headline number suggested, in roughly equal measure. The number you arrive at will be different from mine in the details. The shape of your curve will be exactly the same. If you want the next step from here, the video I'd watch next is the one I made on the smartest order to invest your money. Because once you've decided you're committing $800 a month to a long-term plan, the next question is, which account that $800 should go into? The order matters more than the amount. I'm Tom. I'll see you in the next one.